Hello, my name is Creostix, and welcome back to the list of the top 25 favorite horror games of mine of all time. And we've reached numbers 5 through 1, so without further ado, let's just dive right in. Number 5 is Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly. In Europe, Project Zero 2 Crimson Butterfly. It's a very, very Japanese horror game in which it's a third-person horror game where you are one of two girls, two twins, in that just comes to a haunted village, and you get this old camera, which you use as a weapon in means of you need to get really up close to to the ghosts and hit at the right time to do damage. It sounds simple enough, and it sort of kind of is, and there's a bit of nuance in learning like when to take the pictures to do more damage, but here's the thing. Before this game, I didn't really think that ghosts could really be all that scary, and then... yeah. This game has some of the most nightmarish scenes I've ever seen in anything ever. Like, not only ghosts, but the things that they manage to just, well, do, and what they sound like, what they look like. The direction of the scenes themselves is superb. And imagine when you're really, really, really scared and horrified of the thing you're seeing, and the way you need to defeat that is get closer to it to get a picture of it at the exact correct time. That is genius. It is, in a weird way, it's, again, an example of you stealing your, psyche to face the horror to take the picture, but the combat mechanic, so to speak, the camera, is so sort of non-actiony that it forces you to more like face a fear closer and almost appreciate that fear, then snap the photo, and you don't feel empowered really because it's not a weapon. It's not a it is, but it's not a gun. It's not an axe. It's you take pictures and it works because reasons, and it feels so like it shakes me to my core to even think of doing that. You will get more and more used to doing that over time, but the mechanic itself is still so unique and so geniusly horrorful, if that's even a word, that it's just, I like it. And just one example of the kind of horrors that you'll be facing is indeed the ghosts that are just the scariest ghosts in anything. And just an example is, I remember there's like this sort of tower-like stairway scene where you go in and there's a ghost that apparently the lady has at some point died by jumping down the stairs and breaking the neck. Imagine a ghost that just goes through the motions of jumping down from the stairwell into the floor, breaking her neck, getting up or crawling around, and attacking you, and it looks so freaky when the head is just like twisted like hell, and it keeps doing that over and over and jumping over and over from the stairs again until you manage to finish it off with your camera. It's wow, that is chilling. And the village you go into is an old Japanese village, which to a Westerner like me, the setting already feels so just deliciously unfamiliar that it just fits the concept of just creating dread and fear. And ooh, the one minus I might mention is that it might have a bit more backtracking than one might like, and looking for the next step to go forward. But then again, to find that next step, you're still going up and down and left and right, inside and outside of that superbly scary village full of horrors. Like, you know, I remember just these. I don't want to spoil more scenes, but it's just filled with these moments of just and then you're either you know turn off the game because you're too scared, or you tough it out and take the photos and be a strong little girl because that's what your character is. And yeah, it's one of those cases where just the scariness alone and the method that the scariness is conveyed to you and how you're made to feel fear is so effective and even unique that it's almost on that alone it places on the 5th spot. Like, and it's I think it's on the PlayStation 2 and the OG Xbox at least. So if you want to try to track down a copy. And next up on number 4, this is not just because the number, but is Resident Evil 4. RE4 is like the granddaddy of the modern third-person action horror game, and it is to me so unnerving in its atmosphere and such that it surpasses the fact that it actually has kind of poor controls. The controls are sort of clunky. You can't move and shoot at the same time. You can't even hold a knife and move at the same time. They have aged poorly, and they were pretty annoying even when the game was new. So it takes a bit of getting used to, and it even has a bit too many QTEs, QuickTime events. And without those issues, it would easily be number 2. Next question is, well, if it has like such mentionable issues, why number 4? We've had a lot of good games here. Well, as the last game got really high almost only on being like just effective at creating horror, this is kind of a similar thing in a bit of a different way. Instead of being such a balls to the wall, like just complete fear of just ghosts and such, it's atmospheric as all hell. The atmosphere is, for me at least, crazy effective, especially in the first 2 out of 3-ish areas, where the sound design is so creepy that the oppressive background noise that you get when the zombie-like enemies see you, and the enemy voice lines, which is, you know, they yell stuff and do stuff, it feels, in a weird way, just so unnerving that the game is, just for me at least, especially when it was fairly new, it is and was one of the more just effective games of creating dread and just fear and just atmosphere. And when I mean the voice lines, I mean the Spanish villagers that go the un forastero, and then there's these priest guys who just go like morires vivir, morires vivir, morires vivir, muere, 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 muere. It's jeez. And on top of that, it's again an example where you playing as Leon Kennedy need to steel yourself to survive, and even further steel yourself to find hidden valuable things like treasure, ammo, money, healing items, grenades, that sort of stuff. And it's both scary and thrilling and fun, because next to the fact that it has strong horror atmosphere, creates dread with its environments and sound designs and settings and all that stuff, with, you know, you going to a village that everyone is a zombo-like person, but not quite. They yell Spanish stuff, you don't understand it probably unless you speak Spanish, and it just feels unfamiliar again, and dreadful, and just like, jeez, like creating dread, not like a bad dreadful, but, you know, creates dread. Sorry. And indeed, next to that stuff, it has these fun campy characters. Not too many of them, like not too much of it, but just the right amount. And also there's this merchant character that has become this classic of all video game NPCs. Like everyone, even who has, well, most who haven't even played the game have at some point heard someone go, "What are you buying? What are you selling?" That dude, he's awesome. And there's also a lot of escorting this young lady called Ashley, the president's daughter. But surprisingly, the escorting works really well for a game that old. You can tell Ashley to hide in containers, and she will also duck down if you try to aim anywhere near where she is, and she tends to stay behind you close, if at all possible. So it's sort of like most games after RE4 are the ones that gave escort quests a bad name. So it sounds bad that you need to escort this girl around, but in the end, she never really got in my way. And also, in a strange way, it's, well, not really strange, but it sort of creates another level of this where you have to steel yourself against the horror because you have this NPC, this person to save from all of this terror. It's surprisingly good when it does that. So in the end, it's sort of a combination of, even with the control issues I mentioned, which you'll get around and get used to them, but they feel a bit weird at first. They really will. But in the end, it's scary and unnerving, but also fun in all the exact right combinations. It's just enough of a video gamey to be fun, and also there's enough just funny lines and such to be fun, and it's scary, unnerving, and thrilling. I like it, and it's, for me, number 4. Number 3 is Soma. A bit of a newer game here this time, and if you don't know, Soma is this first-person sci-fi horror game that's set roughly 100 years to the future, and you are Simon Jarrett, who seems to have somewhat recently, in like the past weeks or something, has had, or even months, has had some sort of an accident where he suffered some sort of a head trauma. It might be important, or not. After a short intro sequence, you find yourself in this some sort of a facility under the sea. I'll obviously not, spoil the story points and beats beyond that, but I need to just explain like where you are, like, vaguely, and what's the experience like when you play it. So suffice to say that you're not alone in where you are, at least in the grand scheme of things. And not only is the game like scary in its setting and the environments and such, the atmospheric the settings and the environments create the atmosphere, and because of the confusion of what's going on and all that. But not only that stuff, but also the game is smart. That makes you think like legit questions about philosophy or the world around you, or like, well, most importantly, what does it mean to be human? What is human? That sort of questions. And on top of this, the piecing together of the story is really, really intriguing. I don't want to spoil anything about the story itself, but let's say it surprised me in how just a lot of detail and points and such it has, and you can piece together a timeline in your mind of more or less what happened, which takes some doing, but you can do it, and I like that sort of an approach to a game. On top of these good things, the PC version at least has a safe mode where you can't die to the enemies, which removes the frustration element of the stealth runaway horror sort of a thing, which for me isn't needed. But if you want that to be there, you don't have to play with safe mode on. There's the flexible option to go normal or safe mode, so it works for both audiences, let's say, that's a very, very good thing to do. Like, if you have to have more of the game being more aggressive against you, you can have that. That's the quote-unquote normal way. But if you want to have a bit less, of that frustration, the safe mode is for you. And trust me, I played it through that way, and it's still scary as all hell. And the enemies are not gone. They just probably, maybe will not kill you. Sort of. Like, you sort of, at least in my case, I sort of like, they knocked me out a number of times, but I still woke up, and later on in that same spot, and that sort of stuff. And I can't really think of many real drawbacks in the game. If the genre of first-person immersive, story-rich sci-fi horror at all interests you, this is the best one pretty much of that type of a game that I've played. The story it tells is intriguing and full of sorrow and hopelessness, shock, tragedy, and even psychological and philosophical twistiness. It makes you think while being both scared and feeling sorrow and despair. It feels just profound. I like it. And it helps, at least in my case, that I'm sort of afraid of the ocean, like many people are, so, under the sea, like, yay, that adds a bit of a thing to the proceedings there. It's superb, and I urge you to try it, or at least just see a let's play of it or something. I have a let's play of my own on the channel if you're interested, but yeah, just I recommend you play it. Just it's worth it, I promise. Or I don't know what to tell you if you don't like it. That's where I'm coming from. Number 2 is Condemned: Criminal Origins. Also known on consoles for some reason just as Condemned, I think, for reasons. I don't know why. It's a first-person melee action horror where you are Ethan Thomas, like a crime scene investigator agent person thing, and you investigate these serial killer scenes, or you're investigating a scene of a serial killer, but you get framed for the murder of a police while you're doing that. And then you escape your home and try to prove your innocence by catching the guy who actually did it. And the horror of that game is the fact that the city is, let's say, mad. There's everywhere. There's hobos and brutish men that violently attack you like rage zombies, like they're armed with planks and pipes and even axes, sometimes firearms, but very rarely. And the same goes for you, where most of the combat is melee weapons like that. You can have a few guns in the game, but you get like a pistol of 5 bullets. You can't get more. You shoot those 5 and then you're done, and then you need to get a melee weapon again. So there are guns, but you need to understand that it's a melee horror game. That's most of the combat is melee, period. And the combat system is like, it's very visceral and it's difficult to master, but it works well. It has like, hit things, block things with a good timing, like a parry in like Dark Souls or something. It indeed takes a bit of doing to get a feel for, maybe, but it's in my opinion, a good system that works. It's not too easy that it's like, oh, I'll just hit you like a crowbar in Half-Life. No. But it's not so difficult that you can't just, get a handle on it. It's just a good balance of the two. And indeed, once again, as I've been mentioning on many games, it's again a case of steel yourself against the horror you're seeing to be able to precisely block and hit and move out of the way of hits to survive, right? And there's also a bit of crime scene investigating in the game, which I really like. You get these equipment, to investigate, let's say, chemical traces or blood stains or fingerprints or such and such. And it's a really good way to break the pacing a bit, and you learn what has been going on, what has happened here or in the grand scheme of things, and all that good stuff. And every moment of the game to me oozes atmosphere and fear of what's going to come and from where. It's just visually a pretty dark game, and you need to constantly be aware of the notion that from behind some corner or door, a rage person thing hobo can just come and yell at you and hit you with things, and it feels a lot more scary than it even sounds. Jeez. And you don't know why they are like that, and there's like only a very few handful of normal-ish NPCs in the entire game, so there is that. There is this small minus maybe of that it's a little tiny bit of old school video gamey, in that, for example, like some doors require a very specific fire axe to go through the door, but none of the other stuff you have are good. Like, you can't use your 3 shotgun shells to break the lock, or you can't use the massive giant F-off two-handed maul, or, the sledgehammer, like, no, you need to get the fire axe from, go to hell and back to get it. Like, sure. But then again, getting those specific, like, door opening weapons and such puts you in more scary situations, so, that's also, experience-wise, also good, in the end, in a way at least. There's a positive side to it, let's say. And it also goes for the psychological element, in that you see things that a normal person shouldn't see. The game itself is just one of the most, stressful, scariest games, for me, on the entire list. And it's so scary to me that it reaches number 2. If you haven't tried it, that's one of the more, forgotten modern classics to some people, and you need to maybe give it a go. I recommend that. And number 1. If you've been following me for a while, it's probably not going to be a surprise what this game is. Like, I believe I've mentioned this as a good game in a number of Let's Plays and even vlogs or something. Number 1 is Silent Hill 2. And if you don't know, it's a third-person, open-ish, open world-ish, as in you can go around in an almost open-ish town, and it's a survival horror game at that. It's kind of an action and not, because sometimes it can be just easier to just book it from the enemies, but it's a choice, not a forced thing. And on top of that, it has difficulty settings where on the easiest setting, you can pretty much fight every enemy you see if you just put your mind to it and, learn the combat system enough to do it well. While higher difficulties makes it so that running away in some spots is probably the better option, but again, it's not forced, it's a choice. And on top of this, indeed, as I mentioned, the difficulty settings sort of let you choose what sort of a game you want to play. If you want to just, go at everyone or everything with a pipe in hand and all that, and maybe a gun even in a bit later, you can do that. Just put it on easy, and that should work just fine. It did for me, at least. And there's also a decent number of puzzle solving with inventory items and such, and also the puzzles have a difficulty setting, which is, they may put more items to find or place items in different spots depending on the difficulty setting of the puzzles. But especially if you put the puzzles on easy, it shouldn't be too difficult. Like you may need to just like, okay, what do I put into this hole to go forward? But I did not need a walkthrough to it. And I'm not super good at puzzles, so you should be kind of fine, I think. And you're playing as Harry Mason. The story is that you're drawn to the town because you received a letter from your dead wife to go to that town. Like, okay then. And the thing is, the town itself is... I've mentioned a few like hyperbole things here, but the town itself is the scariest place I can think of. That's pretty much it. It's like this foggy, quiet place that feels like the place hates you, but you're not quite sure. You know? It has monsters in there, but especially at the beginning, not really. And even when it has a monster, it's not like armies of monsters. It has enough empty space to make the place feel even more eerie. It's just the right amount. And it has these psychological twists and metaphors that just... I've heard the term make onions weep when it comes to Silent Hill, and yeah, that kind of fits, really. And on top of being the best example of like dread and horror that like cracks you or cracks your psyche and sort of seeps into your soul and eats you away while creating atmosphere, like feeling afraid. On top of that, you're not the only person in there. They're not hostile, but the other people that you meet, not many of them, but a few, like I don't want to give the exact number, but not many, are drawn there. So you're not the only one who has some weird reason to just like feel drawn to that town. That's important. And every monster element of the... Well, sorry, like every monster and every element of the game that you see has a psychological root and meaning of being there. I don't maybe mean like, well, this pipe has a meaning because psyche. No, I mean like every monster that you see, for example, represents something psychologically. That's all I want to say about that. Either like relating to something, like they have a metaphorical meaning of being there, and that makes the thing feel even more rich and also scary. It's just, it just speaks to me in all the levels. And the same goes for the places, really. Like, you go here because if you want to think about why you're here, it sort of makes sense that, well, because this and this reason is why this, place is here and why you're going through it. And I don't want to like explain the details of that, but when you understand the story, you can start piecing these things like, oh wow, yeah, okay. And the best thing, they make sense, but the game doesn't like hand-holdy tell you. You may need to like go to a wiki and read like, okay, why does this look like this? And oh, okay, interesting. And again, adding on top of all this good is the soundtrack, which is one of the best things in anything, really. That's just the long and short of it. It's crazy good. It's art on itself so hot that the original soundtrack is something you might, if one can, just buy that alone as well, because yeah. So to sort of wrap up the notion here, like Silent Hill 2 is one of the most artistically profound experiences of any medium I've ever encountered. And on top of that, it's the best horror game of all time for me. It's that good. So yeah, I've been going on again a bit here, but I feel like it was worth it. But I do hope you've enjoyed this list of me doing all of these games. So, you know, if one, you know, asks like, what are the good horror games you like? I can just refer people to this list. Like, those are the ones. Like, yay. But indeed, please do give me feedback on if you disagree on anything. I'm willing to like listen and maybe like debate that point even. But more importantly, I do hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have, please do drop a like or a comment or even subscribe or share if you want to. It would really, really help. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.